In this video, I just wanted to share some tips for fishing mangroves or shorelines that are lined with trees. They are typically a very great habitat for inshore fish, especially if there's not much structure out in the open water, like if you have an area where the grass has died off or something like that. Fish will hold tight to the shorelines because the mangroves and the trees are really the only protection they have. So when you are fishing mangroves or trees or heavy structure like this, I recommend going a little bit heavier on your gear, probably no less than 15-pound braid, possibly 20-pound, and then I'll go with 25 to 30-pound leader at a minimum. And your lure selection, you want to go with something weedless because obviously there's a lot of snags in there. So right now I'm using a owner twist lock hook. This is a 3/0 1/8 size. 1/8 ounce with the 3.5-inch slam shady paddle tail. So your lure selection itself, as far as what type of plastic you want to throw, that's really going to be up to you, but I like to go with either a shrimp or a soft plastic jerk shad or a soft plastic paddle tail. Now after every cast you make into the mangroves, I always check my lure, make sure it is still rigged weedless and snagless, and depending on what the water's doing, that's going to determine how I fish the mangroves. So if you're in an area where the water is pushed up, the tide's pushed up, fish are going to push up into those trees. So if you have spots like this where you see there's water way back up there, there's a good chance those fish are going to be up there as well. So it may be hard to go after those fish because they're pushed so far back. Ideally, you want to find an area where the water's not pushed back as far. So as you can see right here, the water pretty much ends right there. Also a little further up here, you can see there are some pockets that you are able to cast into, such as a little hole like this would be something I'd be looking for, because again, it's all about being able to actually get the fish out once you do hook into them. So if you're looking at a spot and you see water pushed way back up there, I would try to skip that spot because it's going to be almost impossible to get a fish out of there. Also, when the water is up, what I like to do is push myself out a little further out from the shoreline. That way I can get a good skip cast. Skip casting is very important when you're fishing mangroves because a lot of the times the fish are going to be pushed either right on the edge or a little bit up into the trees. So when you skip cast, you basically just want to keep that lure close to the surface. As you can see, I was able to skip it all the way back there with no problem. And if you have a hard time skip casting, I recommend going with a shorter rod, possibly a 6-foot or a 6.5 foot. That will definitely help out, because if you're using a longer rod, you may smack the water with a rod tip and it can just be a pain that way. So another good example, this spot right here, the trees are up above the water. There's really nothing in the water there. So again, give it a good skip and just pop it right back out of those trees. Now another technique that I like to use is to basically just cast parallel to the trees or to the shoreline, especially if the water's pushed out and there's not a lot of water pushed up into the trees. Most of the time those fish are going to push to the edge or just off the shoreline. So the best tactic to basically cover a good amount of water is to just cast parallel to the trees and as close as possible to the trees that you can, because if those fish are sitting right on the edge and a bait's coming by, that makes a good way for that fish to ambush a bait. So just casting right parallel down the shoreline. The retrieve is going to depend on time of year, type of fish you're going after. If I'm using a paddle tail, I like to just do a pop and pause type of retrieve. Jerk shad, a little slower, let it pause on the bottom, a couple twitches, let it pause. And again, it's all going to depend on how active the fish are. Now lastly, when you are going along the shoreline, try to cast to every good pocket that you see. Don't miss up a pocket. I see a big mistake people make is that they'll just keep going down until they see something that looks easy to cast to. It's usually those spots that are pretty tough to cast to that are going to hold the fish. So just keep that in mind when you are working these shorelines and working these trees and mangroves. So hopefully these tips can help you out if you are fishing shorelines with mangroves or shorelines lined with trees. Now, if you're having a tough time finding, productive areas, mangrove shorelines can be good and all, but if you don't know which types of shorelines to hit based on the time of year or what the tide's doing, what the weather's doing. All those factors come into play. And if you need help with that, definitely be sure to check out our Salt Strong Insider Club, where we basically show you the trends every week, the best spots to go to, and how to approach those spots. So definitely check that out. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them down below. Until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.